Hello, everybody. Welcome to Radio Dead Air Tech Q&A. You've got questions. We've got guesses. Nash, been doing Radio Dead Air for ages and ages, but in addition to that, I'm also an IT professional. With me, as always, my producer, Mike Gearman, who also works in IT. We'll be taking your questions, as always, tonight. If you have tech questions for me and Mike, you send those to requests at radiodeadair.com. We will attempt to help you out for them, or with them, or stuff. My words.
Sometimes we won't be able to.
Sometimes
it happens.
Yeah. Let's see. Shut up. Forgot to make sure that we had. So we also take questions from the YouTube comments. Gonna make sure there's anything here. Let's see.
So while he's doing that, I've been playing. They re-released Ribbon recently. Remember the game Ribbon?
Sarah's been playing that too. Yeah.
I never played Ribbon. I played Myst, but when Ribbon came out, I was doing other stuff, and I don't know how people got through this game without like lots of hints.
And it was like pre-internet too, like early.
It was 97.
Yeah, early internet. So wikis and stuff were not there.
Hey, let me tell you. I mean, once I started figuring out how they were patterning things, I started getting a little bit better at it. I spent a good 45 minutes trying to figure out the first puzzle.
Well, speaking about figuring out puzzles, Jesus Christ. All right, so we're going to talk about a little bit of news this week, and this is what a fucking mess. So the first story we're covering this week is one of the biggest things to hit American governance in literally 40 years. Now, you've probably been hearing some about this in the news. You've been hearing about this on TV and whatnot. It is the Chevron Deference, or the Chevron decision, or whatever people have been called.
Yeah, it was a precedent set 40 years ago that said, basically, when a regulation is unclear, then deference should be given to the government agency that set the regulation as to what it means. Now, deference did not mean that the government agency always won. It just means if they say, hey, this says sources of pollution. It doesn't list the sources. The government agency can say, this counts as a source. This other thing counts as a source. This third thing, this doesn't count as a source. And the courts generally followed along. Now, because it was deference, there were a number of courts that didn't necessarily listen.
Right.
And what this did is it formalized that the courts don't have to listen at all.
Well,
which is in a lot of ways bad.
The irony here is when this happened was in 1984. This was under Ronald Reagan. And back then, there were a lot of what they would consider liberal judges who were making rulings that were saying, no, you can't do this. No, this is bad for people. No, the agency can't do this. And what this ruling did was it gave the EPA in particular a lot more latitude to not do shit. Yes. Which was the idea that judges should not have the power. We let the agencies have the power, and then the agencies just don't do shit and don't regulate and don't do anything. Well, times have changed.
Now it's given the power to the judges, in this case, a number of right-wing judges, to say, no, the agency can't do that.
The agency can't do anything. Yeah, that's that.
And this is gonna primarily affect EPA, SEC, FTC, FCC, basically the big ones. Like, no one may go after a little thing, but things like net neutrality now may be on the chopping block again.
Yeah, because net neutrality was decided because the FCC is allowed to decide what counts as a telecommunication source. and they classified broadband as telecommunications. Now that can be challenged because they could say, no, you don't have the right to determine that broadband internet is telecommunications. And
now, if Congress came back and said broadband internet is telecommunications, the judges would go, yeah, okay. Because what this decision says is, barring Congress spelling stuff out, the judge gets to decide. Now, one of the problems with this is judges often don't know stuff outside the law. Yeah. Some judges don't apparently know the law very well either. But, for example, there was a case at SCOTUS this week as well that had to do with pollution. And the guy who wrote the decision, which I think was Gorsuch, might have been Kavanaugh, I don't remember.
It was Gorsuch.
Mixed up nitrous oxide with nitrogen oxides or something of that nature. Nitrous oxide, of course, is laughing gas.
Yes. Nitrogen oxide is a pollutant.
Yes. And he put nitrous oxide in his decision multiple times because he didn't know any different.
And he's the son of an anti-EPA crusader, by the way.
Which is why, of course, he was very big on overturning Chevron.
Yeah. So this is very bad because considering the way our Congress currently works and how deadlocked it absolutely is in most ways, especially considering now that the Senate has decided that a majority is 60, not 50, because of the damn filibuster, and the silent filibuster, which they don't actually have to, because nothing can get through Congress without a Herculean effort. That means that quite a few regulations which have any sort of wiggle room, enforcement of those is going to be challenged almost constantly, and they will have to move through the courts. Sometimes it will move to the court and they will get a decision that makes sense, but it will take a very long time for that decision to come down. And in the meanwhile, everyone will continue to act as if Lord of the Flies.
As if it doesn't exist. Now, there's a lot of people thinking, and probably not incorrectly, that the courts will get tired of this nonsense within the next 5 to 10 years and say, you know what, Chevron actually was good law. Let's put it back in place. But that's going to require 5 to 10 years of a lot of work.
And a lot of chaos.
Yes.
Now, how is this going to affect you? Well, net neutrality is one. Net neutrality might be kind of on a fuzzy edge, though, because California kind of holding everything together at this point. Because California is such a huge market and the regulations they make affect so many people, well, companies, rather than try to make a California
piecemeal regulations, right, they'll go, we'll just go with what California did.
Yeah, because there are more customers there. It's a bigger market. And California has a very strong net neutrality law already in place. So net neutrality might be, but there are other things like the SEC, like the ability to tell Facebook you can't harvest people's data. Just think of any time a regulator has stepped in for consumers, for customers, for protection, that is going to be challenged on every single little line they could possibly challenge it.
Yep.
And that's going to mean a lot of cases moving through the courts. And
clogging up the courts.
Yeah, and clogging up the courts, yes. This is going to be, in addition to criminal stuff having to go through, there is going to be so many of these regulation challenges. It's going to get quite insane. And oh boy, the Fifth Circuit's going to go hog wild. The Fifth Circuit, Texas, most of the terrible rulings that have headed up to the Supreme Court of late, even the Supreme Court has had to go, no, that's too crazy for us. Sorry.
They started slapping on the Fifth Circuit, which is good.
We like the cut of your jib, but you need to settle a little, my friend. Just chill.
And so, well, we don't often get terribly political here. This is the kind of thing where if a certain orange goblin gets reelected, it's going to accelerate the bad. So those of you saying, well, I don't know that I can vote for Biden, vote for Biden. Keep the world from falling apart, please. Thank you.
This is going to affect everything. Right to repair is one of those things that has been pushed down. That could get rolled back, and we would have. It's already on thin, but stuff like John Deere saying you can't repair your own tractor. Stuff like Apple being.
Well, states are starting to pass right to repair laws, which will help if the feds don't get their act together.
Basically, we're just going to have to hope that states can cover some of this crap in the meanwhile. But this is going to fall quite a bit on California. Won't be Texas. Texas, in fact, will try to, throw sand in the gears, I feel sure. But a lot of what's going to keep us from, utter terror and horrible stuff is going to be California. And even then, there's not a lot they can do with everything. But even stuff like when the FCC, for example, when my local broadband was screwing up and there was stuff broken and they refused to fix it, I filed an FCC complaint, and that got them to stand up, pay attention, and actually fix what was broken. Hobbling a regulatory agency means
that they may not do that now.
Yeah, because their resources are going to be stretched even further than they already are. And the ability to take care of smaller issues, even issues they still ostensibly have jurisdiction over and can do something about, it's going to get even more dire because, well, only so many hours in the day, and they have to file another court case tomorrow because 10 people challenged them on the meaning of the word is. So it's a mess. It's a giant mess, and it's not nothing but bad. Sorry. I'm sad. I wish we could give you better
better news, but we don't have that right now.
Yeah, it's a mess. So anyway, I guess a little bit better news. Yeah, and this is a little bit annoying. Hey, guess what? This might surprise you. This might blow your mind. But a market where devices only go obsolete in 3 to 5 year periods, maybe that market might be cyclical. And the the associated growth might be cyclical as well. This is irritating as hell.
Part of this is the PC market is slowly rebounding and expected to grow a little bit. And part of this is driven by Windows 11.
Yeah.
Because it has a higher spec list. And as Windows 10 end of lives, a number of companies, just for business reasons, are going to have to upgrade to Windows 11 and have to upgrade their computers.
As a reminder, out of the box, now Windows 11 will run on many things that are not in the requirements, but out of the box for normal people, I say normal people, but out of the box for people who can't edit the installer or don't feel comfortable doing that, and corporations, and it has to go by the requirements. And that means no CPU older than approximately 6 years. Any system that has a CPU older than 6 years, or presumably one that does not have a trusted trusted
platform module.
If it doesn't have one of those, Windows 11 will not install. So that means new computers.
But now you don't need the AI BS part of Windows 11.
No, you don't. That's optional. That is the PC Plus or whatever, the Copilot Plus or whatever the hell that is. But it's frustrating because they're like, it's growing. It was going to grow. It was going to shrink when people had their computers and weren't going to buy any for a while. It was going to grow when they needed new ones. It's like every single reporter on this acts like they have goldfish memory. You know, they act like this is brand new information, that this goes in cycles, but it does.
It's because I think their memory is about as volatile as computer RAM. Oh, they went to sleep and they forgot everything that they knew.
Kinda, yeah. Calling it a recovery is kind of dipshitty to me. This is just, we're on an upswing in the cycles. Now,
and in the third year of Windows 11, it'll flatline,
yeah,
and then it'll tick down a little bit in the fourth and fifth years of Windows 11, and then they'll go Windows 12, and it's you've got to have this chip on your computer, and AI should have largely worn off at that point. So they'll go, okay, you don't need this module anymore.
It's I will say the whole letting them get away with the whole making tons of computers obsolete for the trusted platform module, letting them get away with that was a bad idea, because once they figured out they can hit the refresh button on the entire PC market for sales just by changing a setting in Windows, I think they're going, Microsoft is definitely going to let that go to their heads, and they are going to say, what else can we push a button on to make people upgrade again? Because we got away with it once.
Well, they're going to have to get away with it once because of their sunk cost into AI that's not going to produce any profits for them.
Yeah.
And which they're currently being sued on by at least two different directions. And that's Microsoft.
Giant mess.
Oh, and in case people miss this one, Bill Gates basically, or it was either Bill Gates or the head of Microsoft's AI, basically said, if it's on the internet, we can scrape it. We don't owe anyone anything. So they're gonna get their ball suit off on that one.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I mean, this week, Universal and Warner Music, the music industry got involved and started suing people. So it's gonna be fun. But in any event, PC stuff's back on an uptick. And finally, a little bit of a warning for everybody out there. One of the latest Windows updates patches is kind of optional. It's that's why this is a warning. Is a little busted.
No, Nash. It's a lot busted.
It's a lot busted. Yeah, there is.
It can put your computer into an infinite reboot loop. Blue screen reboot, blue screen reboot, blue screen reboot, blue screen reboot. There are ways to get past it. It's annoying.
It's called KB 503-9302 update. It's for Windows 11. It is, well, it's broke. It's causes a reboot. It is optional right now.
Microsoft has pulled the patch.
Right. This only applies to Windows 11 version 23H2 and Windows 11 version 22H2. Windows servers are fine. So, and if you're on Windows 10, you're fine. But yeah, they made a little boo-boo, and part
of the reason for this little boo-boo is because they don't really have a significant in-house test group anymore, where they can go, let's put this on 50 different computers with mildly different configurations across the board and see what happens. Oh, whoops. 38 of them are blue screening.
So the good news is there is a way around it. Eventually, after reboot looping enough times, Windows 11 starts the recovery environment. Mm-hmm. And while I've never really found the recovery environment to be as useful as it's made out, in fact, I've often quite found the recovery environment like such a good idea, such a terrible implementation. It does not help unless you get to the command prompt and you know what you're doing there. But this one, if you go to Troubleshoot, then advanced option, if you're in this situation, Troubleshoot, advanced options, and uninstall updates, Click on the uninstall the latest quality update. That'll pull it off, and you should be able to boot normally again.
Now, it says here, it will take some time for this KB to be removed. Sometime, I've read elsewhere, is up to an hour.
Yeah. But once it's done, you will have your computer back. So otherwise, if it's pulled, so you shouldn't be able to install this accidentally. But just keep your eye out for it, and they'll come around again. They'll get it. Hopefully they'll fix it and get the right one properly set up. Man,
I do remember a couple 3 years ago, they had a patch that they released, and it was flawed, of this level of flawed.
Yeah.
So they pulled it, and then they re-released it, and it was still flawed.
Yeah.
So they pulled it again, and then they re-released it, supposedly fixed, and then they pulled it a third time. And actually, that might have been one of the 20H2 or 21H2 things. Yeah. It was something that was really bad, and I was going, please don't let us roll this out at work. I don't want to deal with this level of workload.
The degree to which Microsoft's testing for their patches has degraded over time is just really stunning. I mean, we go back 10 years, the links that, or more than 10 years, back to the links they went to get Vista tweaked into Windows 7 after such a bad backlash. The number of computers they tested, they tested Vista on a bunch of systems too. The number of systems and configurations they tested those operating systems on was astonishing. And now they're just like,
they're not even testing. They're not even saying, we could AI model these tests. They're not even doing that. They're not even trying to BS us that.
Yeah.
There was actually, by the way, there's an actually very interesting opinion piece on the Register. If you don't read the Register, it's a great UK-based tech site. The opinion piece was Windows insecure by design, and it just goes into that Microsoft just can't get their act together when it comes to security, and haven't been able to for years.
Which is really, that's one of those things that concerns me. Seeing as we have all moved by default to Windows Defender, which is it's now become one of those crucial underpinnings of the internet, because no one wants to pay for antivirus anymore. I mean, there are options like Bitdefender, which are free. Bitdefender's free with extra, but Bitdefender will do everything Windows Defender does for free as a separate piece of software. But I don't think people have even thought about putting antivirus on their system for over a decade now, ever since Windows Defender came out. So the idea that they might shit the bed on Windows Defender one time should be enough to keep every sysadmin lying awake at night. Just the idea of that. I mean, the craziness, the recall thing that Microsoft went through, the craziness that they didn't test it for security, and that a few security researchers with almost no resources, just by themselves, broke that AI recall feature and be like, oh yeah, we got all the encrypted stuff that shouldn't we be able to look at? Yeah, we can look at it all. We can look at it remotely. We can just get right into your computer and see all the shit you've been doing. Yeah, it's right there. The idea that, so it's nuts, but just keep your eyes open on this one. Little else you can really do. Just cross your fingers. All right, that's the news for this week. Now let's get to your tech questions. We've got a few here. One more came in. Let's go to what we already have to start with. You want to go in order?
Why not?
All right, this first one is from Andy R. in Minneapolis. Hey, Nash and Mike and Grady, and I don't know the rest of the names. Fair enough. I think we have like 20 cats here now or something. I don't know. Not really, but feels like Yeah. I finally scraped together enough money to replace my GTX 1080 with a used RTX 4070 Ti Super. You don't say what kind of a deal you got on it, but that's a good jump. Good significant upgrade there. I wiped my old drivers, got it installed with no problems, but it doesn't seem like it's doing everything it can. I ran some benchmarks and played around in Cyberpunk for a while, but the frame rate I'm getting doesn't seem to match a lot of the comparison videos on YouTube show what I should be getting. And I want to take a second to show you this YouTube channel real quick, because we will circle back to this. Spoilers, this is bad. You should not, this is not a good YouTube channel. They're a lot like this, and we'll talk about it. Let me put this over here on the big screen. You see a lot of YouTube channels like, it's very loud. You see a lot of YouTube channels like this where they'll put up these comparisons between different video cards and say, oh yeah, we're playing the games like this. Well, all right, yeah. Well, we'll start here, I guess, because it's linked in the email. Many, if not all, of these channels like this are crap. They're lies. They don't actually do the testing. They just put together approximations based on testing other people have done, but they don't really do the real testing. Sometimes you'll actually see the live game running with FPS and everything, but they have altered it to probably a lot of the time what they do is they get the biggest video card, and then to simulate the other cards, they just clock it down to act like the other ones. These are
which is not going to have the same effect, right? Because just clocking it down is not everything that is the difference between the cards.
Essentially, if it's not coming from a reputable site where you can see people's faces and they talk on the camera, or it's something like Gamers Nexus, Hardware Unboxed,
Tom's Hardware still?
What?
Tom's Hardware still?
Tom's Hardware. Hardware Canucks. If it's not from them, don't trust the FPS figures.
Take with a grain of salt.
Take it with. Get it from a reputable source first, because these aren't exactly. Yeah, they aren't exactly trustworthy.
Now I have my opinions on why this is happening, and that is.
Well, let me read the rest of it. So yeah.
Oh, sure.
They're seeing over 100 FPS at 1440p, and I'm only getting a little above. I think it's supposed to be above a little above 70. I wanted to ask you guys to find out if I missed a setting or something. I'm using the latest drivers. Say Ryzen 5 3600. That is an asterisk right there. MSI B450 Tomahawk. Another asterisk. 16 gigs Corsair Vengeance DDR4 3200. Western Digital Black 1 terabyte NVMe. Corsair CX 750 PSU 750 watts. So the power supply is fine. That's more than sufficient for a 4070 Ti Super.
And I'd say the hard drive is fine as well.
Yeah, I'm stumped. I spent a lot on this, and any help would be appreciated.
Okay. So my first thought is not the RTX 4070 Ti Super.
Yeah.
PCIe 4.
Yeah, that is, well, that's the first one. It is PCIe 4. That's one of the points I was going to get across too. B450, while it does support CPUs forward, it's also limited to PCIe 3.0. Now,
which is gonna cut your effect of the card a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard to say because PCIe 3.0 was barely being saturated with video cards at the time. PCIe 4.0 still isn't being saturated. The bandwidth is still very available.
But I would also say that Cyberpunk is also a very intensive game on what it chunks on cards.
But so that's one part of it. The PC, you're using an older version of PCIe. That's just part of the motherboard. That's part of B450. If it was B550, you'd be on PCIe 4, but the other issue here, and this is a big one, this is something we've mentioned in the past, but haven't really got into it. You're using a Ryzen 5 3600 and you're trying,
you might be CPU throttling is what we're going into.
This is a bottleneck issue. What can happen? You have two main components that are drawing the frames in your game. There's a lot of stuff going on, but the two big ones are your CPU and your GPU. The CPU will go over to the GPU and say, hey, draw me this frame. Any frame. And it will keep saying, frame. And the GPU will go, okay. If the GPU can't keep up with the request from the CPU, you are GPU bottleneck. You are GPU limited. That's what happens with a lot of games where, the frame, your GPU is limited. The CPU is faster. The CPU is asking for frames faster than the GPU can provide them. Conversely,
this is the reverse case.
This is the reverse case.
This is the CPU is going, I need a frame. And the GPU is going like, frame. I need a frame. Frame. I need a frame. Frame. I need a frame. Frame. You could be asking, the GPU is going, you could be asking faster. No, man, I can't.
The CPU simply can't request the frames fast enough to make this work. Now, that doesn't mean the CPU's crap. I mean, you're getting 70 frames per second at 1440p in Cyberpunk. You don't mention your other settings, but that's not terrible. But you want to get what you paid for, and I understand that. But you're not going to get it with the CPU. It's too old. It was a motherboard model. It was an MSI B450 Tomahawk, which is not a bad board. But it's what you're not going to, I don't think you need to replace your entire platform. But there's a reason that the 5800X3D is so popular and the 5700X3D, because that one's down to $193 now, which is not a bad price. Those CPUs can keep up with any GPU for frame rate. They can ask for frame rates, and there is no bottleneck because of how they're designed, because of the 3D stacked RAM. There's no bottleneck. That's how they can affect frames per second. Now I don't think you need to go wild with you don't need an X3D CPU here. Maybe if you feel like it, but you definitely should get an 8-core 16-thread at the very least. It's maybe looking to a 5700. Those can be had, or 5700X, not the regular. The 5700s, don't touch that one. 5700X can be had for a reasonable price these days. In fact, let me have a look at eBay real fast here. The reason I say don't get the 5700 is the 5700 is not the same as the 5700X. AMD pulled a stupid here. It's not a good bet. Don't touch it. 5700X can be had for about 160, which is not terrible. I mean, if you want to move up and get a 5700X 3D, those are about 200, and that would definitely get you most of the way to
now, the thing to note is you may have to do one or more BIOS updates on this. Just something to keep in mind. As someone who's done that, it can be annoying.
But yeah, it's so if you were using a less demanding graphics card, and you probably were, you were using a GTX 1080, that's why you didn't notice this before. It wasn't a problem before, because
in that case, the CPU was going like, hey, I need frames, and GPU was going like, gotcha, bro.
They were they were pretty close in sync to one another, but you're jumping 3 generations up with your GPU. It's gonna make a difference.
Yeah.
So
and I agree, 5700X is good. It's going to be about the same wattage as I think as your current CPU.
Yeah.
So you won't have to upgrade anything there. It should be a drop-in replacement on that motherboard. looking at the specs here, yes, it is a drop-in replacement. The B450 Tomahawk supported CPU list is vast.
Yeah, AMD has been great with the efficiency and keeping power levels down between generations. They've been not. Intel's having issues. AMD's been right on top of that. So if you're not ready, however, if you're not ready to upgrade right now, at least we can tell you there is probably nothing wrong with that graphics card. And you've done everything. It sounds like you've done everything right, especially wiping the drivers before you put the new card in. That's always a good step to take. But it sounds like there's nothing wrong with that card. The card's working as intended. You're just being limited by the rest of your system. So that's the good news. If you got this used, that's you didn't get ripped off. You're fine. Just, you're going to have to get a faster CPU to make the most of it. I'm sorry. I wish I had better news on that account, but at least, hey, you didn't get taken here. You're good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the PCIe 3, Daryl, it's not as big of a frame loss as the CPU is. It is somewhat, but
yeah,
they've done tests about it, and it's not huge. It's not. It's something that says it's not even noticeable.
It's in the range of 5 to 10 sometimes.
Sometimes it's very dependent on.
It's dependent on game, which is often dependent on how well they coded the game. Yeah. And it's dependent on other settings as well. Yeah. What settings you make in the game.
But the good news on this one is you did things fine. The GPU is just fine. Yeah, the GPU is just fine. It's just you need to upgrade a little bit more. So, hey, it's still going to work to play the games. It's still going to. I mean, in fact, if you actually, I don't know if turning it down to 1080p would make it more CPU limited. The really ironic thing here is if the GPU is calling for frames less, like for example, if you ramp it up to 4K, then they come back into sync, even if it's an older CPU like the Ryzen 5 3600. They get closer in sync the higher your resolution goes. Lower resolution goes, then you're getting more CPU limited. That's how that goes. All right, next question. Hi, cats and everyone else. Okay. That priorities, I suppose.
I'm lumped in with the possum and the raccoon now.
With the possum. Me too. I didn't get a name there.
You feed them. I'm 2,800 miles away.
Okay, I have a weird one. The Bluetooth on my laptop won't stay connected for anything longer than 22 minutes. I timed it. It'll stay connected less than 22 minutes, but never longer. I've tried my mouse, my Xbox One controller, a cheap little speaker I got at Walmart, and nothing stays connected. I've tried moving the laptop around the house in case there's interference or something, but it just keeps doing it. The Wi-Fi is fine and never drops out at all. Can you help? Thanks, Rana.
Okay, so this is the sort of thing that it feels like it's driver issues, and you maybe have updated the drivers.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not driver issues. I used to have, back when I was living in South Carolina, I had a router that would drop connection every 97 seconds, which is really annoying when you're gaming.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what the fix was on that, just that it took a long time to track down. Now, I think, based on other research I did, excuse me, that this is solvable. There is a Windows troubleshooter for Bluetooth that might fix this.
Okay.
So if you go to Settings, Update and Security, and then Troubleshoot, scroll down to Find and Fix Other Problems, and then select Bluetooth and Troubleshoot. A lot of people are reporting this same sort of issue, 20 minutes or in that neighborhood. And they ran this troubleshooter, and I went through, and it changed some things, and suddenly they're not dropping their connections. When it's multiple devices like this, it is not usually a driver for the device. It is something with the OS.
Yeah, the different devices here, the mouse, the Xbox One, all of them having the same behavior. It's not those devices. Those devices are all. In fact, you got like the cheap speaker from Walmart. They're all fine. They're all absolutely fine.
I mean, unless you got spectacularly unlucky with every single device, which could happen, but it's rare. So I would try that Windows troubleshooter first and see what it comes up with.
I'd agree it's likely a software thing. But just to be, play devil's advocate here, there is also, well, not devil's advocate, just another a worse option here. There is the possibility that the Bluetooth radio is failing.
That's also true.
Wi-Fi cards these days in laptops, typically they combine the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi onto one card. They are separate chips, unless sometimes I think Intel combines them now for like a whole system on a chip thing together. Regardless, the radios are different, and or at least sometimes they are. I have seen instances where network cards in laptops, or not network cards elsewhere. In fact, I think Sarah had an issue like this. The part of the wireless card will be absolutely fine. Like the Wi-Fi will be fine, or the Bluetooth will be fine.
The Bluetooth won't be. Yeah,
the Bluetooth won't be, and the Bluetooth will be fine, but the Wi-Fi won't be. And it is a hardware issue because for some reason these things wear out. Now, what I'm thinking potentially, the fact that it gets to 22 minutes and starts doing this may be a heat issue.
Possible.
Because if you it might be what's happening is the system runs for a certain amount of time, something is getting too warm, and that's when the Bluetooth stops working. So in addition to doing the software fix, maybe just take some compressed air, blow out the fans.
Yeah.
Couldn't hurt.
And, now, if the troubleshooter doesn't work, and the relatively minor cleaning we're asking you to do doesn't work, you could also look into a USB to Bluetooth adapter.
Yeah. To
just give yourself an extra little radio on Bluetooth radio, effectively.
Yeah.
See if that has the same issue. We're talking a relatively inexpensive piece of equipment.
$10.
It's like $10 to $12.
Yeah. They're tiny now. They'll fit. They won't like stick out of your laptop. They're kind of like the radio receivers for mice these days. They're about the same size. They're tiny.
So if you put one of those on there and say, hey, connect to this Bluetooth instead of this other Bluetooth on the computer, and this one stays up, whereas the other one keeps dropping out after you do the other suggestions we have, then yes, I would say it is a heat or other damage on the device issue.
Yeah, that is a good way to eliminate the internal, to determine if it's yeah. So, okay, good luck with it, and let us know what happens. All right. Hi, Nash and Mike. This is from Rich T. I'm looking to pick up a used desktop locally on either Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, probably Facebook, because I've seen some pretty decent deals and I won't have to pay tax and stuff. But I also know that's risky. Still, I want to try it. Do you have any tips to make sure I don't get stuck with a lemon? Any software or other diagnostics would be helpful too. Thank you very much, and thank you for the show. Okay, Rich. The first tip I have is don't. That's the very first tip. Don't do this.
Yeah. My first tip, if you insist on going through with this, would be don't use media that came with the computer.
Well, this is so damn tricky. It's not even like a laptop. The problem here is, how do you meet up and test a desktop computer? Now, if you go to someone's house, which is not always ideal for these sort of I've never done any of these damn transactions. If you go to someone's house, then you got a monitor, you have an outlet you can plug stuff into, keyboard and mouse. But say you meet somebody at like a parking lot for a McDonald's or something, then what the hell are you going to do?
Exactly.
So that's already tricky issue number one. You're pretty much, what you get is, unless you have some way to test it there and then, what you get is what you get. All sales are final. So there's a big risk. This is why typically,
and if they have a Ferengi symbol on their car when they show up, yeah, just bail.
Typically when we recommend used stuff, there's nothing wrong with used electronics. In fact, used electronics tend to, if they're working, they stay working for a long time, unless they have some kind of a fault. It's hard to kill them. But you definitely want to make sure, however you purchase them, you have a system of buyer protection. eBay's got very famous buyer protection. That's why we tend to recommend doing that, because if you do get a lemon and the seller is like, too bad, eBay will refund you and then take it out on them, because they will do what it is to keep you happy.
Another option, possibly a little pricier, well, probably a little pricier, and you will pay tax on it, is a site like Newegg, which does refurbed desktops as well.
Now, as far as diagnostic software, that's a little hard to gauge. What was that? Unreal Heaven. It's a little bit of an older benchmarking software, but it is fairly viable, and if you crank up the settings on it, it will put the system through its paces. If you let it run, and it runs a demo in the background, it's a game demonstration benchmarking. It runs a demo in the background, and it's based on Unreal Engine. And if you let it run for a while, it has a good chance of tripping up any potential issues with the system. There are a couple other benchmarks you might look into like that. What was the other? God dang, I forget what the other one is. Superposition. Yeah, this one. These are free, by the way. Superposition benchmark is a little bit more of a more modern one. Uni Engine Heaven, sorry. Superposition benchmark is a little bit more of a modern one, which has, I think it covers ray tracing and some other modern graphics cards features. That's another one you can run to see if it, do not buy from someone who will not let you go, can I test this thing out real fast? If someone will not let you do that, bye-bye. Go away.
Buy it.
Don't. Yeah. Also make sure, I would kind of, with these days, well, I want to say I'd like to put the onus on someone else to clean it, or at least blast it out with compressed air before you get a hold of it. But most people don't seem to know how to do that, which is very frustrating, because so many problems are caused just by not keeping your system properly clean. It clogs your intakes, you clog your heat sinks. Little tangent here. The fins on a heat sink depend on being able to come into contact with air to radiate the heat. And when those get clogged with dust, you lose heating surface area. The more surface area you lose, the less effectively your heat sink can transfer heat away from the system. So you've got to keep that clean on a regular basis, unless you have an all-in-one. That's different entirely. You got to keep your systems cleaned out. Radiators have to be cleaned out. Dust inhibits the proper transmission of heat. That's the main thing these things are supposed to do. If they're not dusted in like just enough to keep the dust from accumulating in layers, then you will get worse performance over time. Let's see. I mean, you could also do something like Hardware Info, which is also free, just to run it and see if you get any weird, like if the temperatures are way up, you can look at the temperature sensors and see if there's something weird going on there. Like if you see some high temperatures on the graphics card, the CPU, or even just the system itself, that might be a red flag there. That's not something you can just see and look at. So yeah, I'd say that. Okay. Mike, you got anything else? Because that's about as far as I
No, that's about it.
Yeah. just don't buy from someone who won't let you test it out in some way or shape or form, because that's I just, the whole idea of buying on, like, there's no receipt, there's no, I mean, yeah, you have no taxes, and likely most of the time you're not going to get. I have bought one thing so far on Craigslist, which was an old amplifier I got as is. He told me the situation, and I was like, I'm fine with it.
Because you were planning on refurbing it anyway.
Right. But just so, well, good luck with it. All right, Daryl has got one in late. That's it here now. All right.
Okay.
Hello, Nash and Mike. I use Audacity to edit audio, and I have a problem with the cursor. To select a point in the audio, the icon turns to the eye-shaped cursor like you use in Word or other text documents. Not only is it very thin, but I have a 4K monitor, and this makes the icon incredibly small. The cursor size is fine on Word, Outlook, Discord, the chat window, and Twitch, but impossible to find in Audacity. I'm pretty sure hunting for the damn cursor is adding an extra hour of work every week in aggregate. Is there anything I can do to increase the size of that cursor? Tried taking a screenshot, but kept removing the cursor from the shot. So I tried to take a picture of my phone, and you actually can't see the cursor in the picture. Audacity with that is very specific.
Yeah.
Got the 4K monitor. Are you using scaling?
Okay,
Daryl?
so I'm looking at the Audacity forums.
Yeah.
And one user saying, my Audacity follows the size of the computer cursor, so maybe try changing it there. I don't know if that's true, because other people are going like, no, not necessarily.
Well, well, my thinking there is, this is a matter of display scale. If you go, let me show you. If you go under settings, display, and then scale and layout, and you can check and set a custom scale. What this will do is this will increase the size of your the apps and stuff in relation to a larger monitor. So tiny text will get, think of it as rescaling everything to as if you were using a 1080 monitor or 1440p. It would rescale it around to where it's back to a normal size. Text scaling, but not any other scaling. Okay. Well, no, this changed the size of text, apps, and other items. Yeah. That should it. Do you already have scaling going for that? The scale and layout, the custom scale. Do you already have that going? Daryl's in the channel right now. You can answer that.
Yeah, some people have suggested also trying dark mode, and the cursor becomes more visible then.
Seems like, well, this is just one of those open source issues where they don't consider the ramifications of the user interface. They do that quite a bit. Engineers tend to write software with tons and tons of features that do tons and tons of stuff, and then make it the worst user interface to actually figure out how to get into anything. It's really frustrating. I got it's why, like OBS, the original version of OBS was garbage because it was very powerful software and you couldn't figure out how to set it up to save your freaking life. Once they decided, hey, we're going to give this entire UI makeover so it's intuitive and people can figure out what the hell they're doing. That was OBS Studio. And that's what most people use now because OBS was frustrating as shit. At least in this stays for Audacity. Yeah. Daryl, are you there? Stop responding. Are you using scale and layout, the custom factor in not text scaling, but like overall resolution scaling? and you're not responding. So checking now, using Windows 11 or scale and layout. The drop down for scaling is showing 200%. Okay. Just go under the advanced settings and see if you've got let Windows try to fix apps so they're not blurry on as well. And then look for custom scaling. Try to mess around with that if it's not on. Yeah, look under the advanced settings because that's what I use on mine. Scaling isn't applying to Audacity's icons. Well, yeah, that is a problem with scaling in Windows. It is entirely dependent on if the application in question supports it.
Yes, but I'm just going to seg onto something here. And this is something I've run into at work with other apps. Yeah. So there's this app called Citrix. Citrix is a virtual desktop sort of deal. I really don't know what the people who use it for. I just know they use it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we've run into is if they have multiple screens, which most of our people do, and those screens have different scaling factors. Like one screen is at 200%, one screen is at 100%. Citrix uses the scaling factor of the primary screen, no matter what screen it is on. So if it's on a secondary screen for whatever reason, and you go to click a button, it goes, you didn't click a button. You clicked somewhere 2 inches to the left, right, up, or down or something from a button. Because I'm thinking it thinks you're. I reported this to the people who made Citrix years ago, and they still haven't fixed it.
Well, yeah, it is dependent on whether the application is compatible with Windows scaling issues. This might be just one of those. Unfortunately, Daryl, this might be one of those issues you have to submit a request to someone to fix it, since it is an open source software. Unless there is some way to customize or replace the cursors in Audacity, and I don't think there is, because I think those are hard built into it. You might just be kind of stuck with it. Like the best option I like Mike I heard is switching it to dark mode to try to make the cursor more visible. I mean, of course, there is another option. If you hit, yeah, you can see it on the screen right now. You can't see my cursor, but you see that little ring appearing on the screen. You see that? That is when I hit Control. It tells me where it gives it does a little thing so you can see.
There's a pulse saying where the yeah, that's a Windows setting.
Yeah.
And it's something I keep meaning to turn on work computers and go, yeah, no. Because I'll be sitting at someone's computer going, okay, we're fixing this. Where'd the cursor go?
Yeah, you hit that. It'll help you follow where the cursor is. So that might help. Best I can tell you. Just welcome to the quirks of open source software. It's people who are working on it. Sometimes they're getting paid, sometimes they aren't. And ta-da.
And it's also one of those things that they go, this was our design decision. We can back up why we did this. What's going on with you? And you go, oh, well, when you guys wrote this, screens were a lot smaller. And they'll go, oh, yeah, we should take that into account. I run into it with other sound software because VSTs, virtual instruments, often use JPEGs for the instrument. Like, here's your instrument layout, and it defines where the sliders are going to be and what they look like. But it doesn't scale. So what was a nice big instrument on a monitor 5-10 years ago is now a little tiny instrument on these monitors.
Like, I had to Winamp. I still use Winamp for Radio Dead Air, and I actually had to go into Winamp settings because it didn't respond to Windows scaling. It had its own scaling.
Because it says ignore They code it in there. Ignore Windows scaling. Use my own.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to do it for us for this week. We'll be back next Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern. If you have tech questions for me and Mike, you can send those to requests@radiodeadair.com, or you can leave those in the comments on YouTube, and we can pick those up from there. Folks, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we'll see you back here next time. Good night, everybody.